Okay, so right now you're in one of two camps. Either you've seen all the news headlines about the real estate lawsuit and all the new rules, or you have no idea what I'm talking about. So if you fall into the second camp, know there was a really big lawsuit and it has totally changed the way real estate works. So even if you've heard the news, I promise you, you haven't heard the real news. You've heard media clickbait. So if you will stay tuned, I will tell you the top 3 things you need to know about doing real estate in the new market. Okay, so let's first talk about what happened. A long time ago in 2019, there was a lawsuit that got started and it carried on, got pretty big in 2023. And it started in Missouri, where basically there was this statement that commissions were higher than needed to be because sellers didn't have control of how much would be paid. They didn't know how much would be presented to the buyer agent because they were posted in the MLS system. Don't worry if you know or don't know what that means. That there was this proposed amount they would pay. They were forced into paying it because it was already out there. It was a fixed rate. Sometimes if some sellers weren't paying as much as another seller, that could influence an agent. Maybe they didn't show those lower commission homes. Now, do I know if any or all of these things are true, or do they apply to everyone? Maybe. Remember when you were a kid and one kid would talk in class and the teacher would say, if anyone else says anything else, everybody's going to miss 10 minutes from recess, and one kid would talk and the whole class would miss 10 minutes of recess. That's kind of what happened here. Can't say that's never been true, but I will say that in my business and the business of most of the agents I work with, I've never observed these things. But all that being said, we now have to adjust, and there have been some pretty big changes. Now, the changes are clear, but the biggest argument was that real estate contracts, because they were written by attorneys, by the by, are confusing. And I know that they're confusing because I remember when we were learning how to use my first contract, which was like, 9 revisions ago in my career, I remember hearing one broker interpret it one way and then an attorney interpret another way. So I'm a quizzical girl. I'm like, hey, I heard from my broker that this was the case. And the attorney says, yeah, Tammy, I get that. And there's a lot of confusion on this. In fact, we put 12 attorneys in a room together recently and we asked them to interpret this and they all said something different. So you're telling me an attorney and or attorneys drafted this document and now 12 other attorneys cannot even interpret it. So what do you expect agents and brokers to do? And how do you expect consumers to understand them? Right, exactly. So several companies actually have taken a step further and gone so far to try to make contracts both for hiring an agent and for signing a contract on a home much more clear. We're going to continue to see revisions throughout the year on this, but all of that being said, because they said it wasn't clear, a lot of people walked away from experiences not really knowing. Now, not necessarily getting in trouble or anything bad happening, but just not understanding. So when all these changes happened, and there were a lot of words like decoupling, cooperative compensation, those sort of things, concessions, compensation, transaction cost, here's what I know. Most consumers don't even know how to interpret those words. So I bumped into a handy dandy guide that was first created by a law professor. Now, she was mostly correct in the things she said, not her opinion-based stuff, but in some factual things. But in the state of South Carolina where I operate, there were things that were a little bit different. And I did soften some of the things she said. I didn't take out any of her bold assertions, but she made some statements, which I'll talk about in a second, that were maybe her bias and not factual. So I wanted to explain those as well. So we're going to take a peek at this guide. Also, it's going to be available hyperlinked in the description, so you'll be able to take a closer look at this in your leisure. So the first thing you're going to see here is it says it's the ultimate buyer's guide to real estate commissions and signing agreements. So obviously money is going to become important in this information. Now, here's what this guide does. It's going to explain to you the biggest change for buyers, which is that you now have to sign an agreement if you want to see a home. Now, that's the first hurdle, because normally a buyer just calls an agent, maybe it's someone they know, and they say, hey, I want to see a home. Like today, a past client reached out to me. A home came on the market 2 weeks ago, and she says, Tammy, I know this is crazy. I have no business selling my home and even thinking about buying another home. I haven't said anything to you for 2 weeks, but I just peruse this on Zillow every day, and I made the mistake of driving by it, and I love it. Can we go see it? I might be selling my home and buying this home. Cool, yes. Now in the past, when she called me to see a home like this, I just bebopped in my car, hopped over there, showed her the house. And then when she was ready to start talking brass tacks and details, then we moved into signing an agreement. We call that substantive contact. Well, now under the new law, it says, hey, if it's not my listing and I'm showing her a house, she has to sign an agreement. Now we're going to talk about the different types of agreements in just a minute, but that's one of the bigger things. Now, I want to point this out because sometimes it doesn't make sense to discuss something if you don't understand words that are going to be used a lot. Anytime you hear the word agent and brokerage, we're using those interchangeably. Technically, a customer is a customer of the brokerage, so the company. Think like for me, eXp Realty, okay? Now, you're going to work with me, Tammy, directly. I'm your agent. So you are working with eXp Realty and Tammy Woodbury, okay? So when I talk about the buyer agent and the brokerage, or the listing agent and the brokerage, think of that as like a single unit, okay? They're unified, okay? And then the other thing you need to know about are commissions, concessions, transaction costs, closing costs. We kind of use those words interchangeably. I should have tossed the word compensation in there as well. You'll see why in a second, all right? This is how commissions used to work. And so to understand where we're going, you need to understand where we came from, because there are actually people who don't know this. So the way real estate basically has been done in the past is a seller would hire an agent to represent them, but also in their listing agreement where they hired their agent, they would also have an increased fee for their agent that they would share with the buyer's agent. So long story short, the seller paid for their agent and the seller also paid for the buyer agent. Now, I'm going to go into this right now, but do buyers really get a free buyer agent under the old model philosophy? No, because they're buying the home, and obviously part of the cost of the home was the cost for real estate commissions. But the bottom line is the buyer didn't have to come out of pocket any extra cash money to pay for their agent. The seller paid for them, okay? Now, why is this different? For one, at that time, whatever amount the seller was willing to pay for the buyer's agent, it was listed online. So a buyer agent always knew exactly how much that seller for that home was willing to pay. Well, let's talk about where we're going. And don't worry, I'm going to summarize this because it's a lot of reading, right? All right, so with this lawsuit, there was a big class action lawsuit and there was a settlement. The DOJ, Department of Justice, was involved and they issued all these rules. Now, pause. Let me tell you, all of these rules went into effect on August 17th. We will not have a final signed agreement until November of this year. I fully expect, as today is still August 2024, that we will continue to see changes, as we have already encountered several problems as agents, because the DOJ rules don't necessarily coincide with state law for real estate or national law or even contract law. So now we're in this messy middle of trying to figure out implementation. But the DOJ made several statements, and one of the things that they made as a required change right here, one of the biggest changes, is that the MLS system is no longer going to post whatever commission the seller is willing to pay, or if a seller is willing to pay. Now, are sellers still paying buyer agent fees? Yes. And I want to pause here because I have talked about this a lot on different videos, but I have not stopped here. People want to know, do you think sellers will always pay? Here are my thoughts on sellers paying buyer agent commissions. One, if I had to guess, okay, I just could roll the dice. You know, I have a magic 8-ball and I can just guess these kind of things. I would say probably for the immediate future, sellers will be asked continually by buyers to pay for their agent fees, and sellers may likely agree. Why do I think this will happen? Because the law changed overnight. But buyers were unprepared for this. Sellers still need to sell homes. Buyers still want to buy homes. And my grandmother taught me one of the wisest things of all time. And if you're not from the South, hang with me. You don't get blood from a turnip. Basically, if they don't have the money to pay, they can. So let's say your buyer has been saving their money. They have their down payment. They have their normal closing costs, which we'll talk about in a second. But they don't have the additional money to pay for their agent. But they want representation. So they go to the seller, they ask the seller to pay. Seller would love to save the money, but at the end of the day, this is the only buyer or the strongest buyer that has shown up to buy their home, and they also want to sell their home. So they say, hey, during this changing time, it looks like buyers may not have the additional money saved up to be able to pay their agent commission, so fine, I'll do it, okay? That could continue to happen. That is what we have been seeing in our local market very recently, okay? Now, how will that work out in the future? I love answering this question. Okay, so I've been selling real estate for 2 decades now. 2006, early part of the 2000s, real estate was hot, hot, hot. And if you are too young and or did not experience this, 2007 screeching halt housing crisis. If you didn't actually live to experience that, you weren't born, you're too young, whatever, great, good news, because you would not have enjoyed it, okay? But it was a bad time in real estate, a really bad time in real estate. Now, during that time, sellers were doing crazy things like selling their home for below market value, because they would go to sell their home. There'd be a ton of buyers shopping, but there might be 30 or 40 competing homes. So basically buyers would walk into 30 or 40 homes that they loved all of them, but they were like, who can I get the most blood from? Who can I get the best deal on this home for? And that's the home that they would go after. They get the cheapest price. They'd ask the seller to pay their closing costs. They'd ask them for all types of repairs, crazy stuff, okay? And they got it. Why? Because we were in a buyer's market. There was too much inventory. So if a seller had to sell, they were going to have to play ball in that market. They didn't have other options. All right. Fast forward, 2020 happens. Real estate explodes. Like, we've never seen markets like this all over the country, okay? So if a buyer needed a seller to pay closing costs, I mean, that was fine, but it just wasn't going to happen. I remember a period of 3 years. I never once had a single seller pay any closing costs for 3 years. Why? Because there were multiple offers. Buyers had really strong financials. In fact, in the very beginning, I would say the first 7 or 8 months, local buyers that were using a loan to buy a home, they literally could not compete, because there would be like 3 other cash buyers that would show up, and they would tell the seller, don't worry about the home appraising because I've got all this extra money. I don't need a loan. We can close super fast. I don't need you to pay anything for me. And I don't even care if you make any repairs. So meanwhile, over here, like the normal buyer who was like, I've got my down payment. Can you pay some of my closing costs? Seller's like, well, I'm not mad at you, but no, because this buddy over here doesn't need anything. I want to go with this guy. I'm going to make some more money. Well, the local buyers got really smart. They kept getting rejected with their offers, and all of a sudden, month 9, 10, or 11, they make their offers against the cash buyers still. They're out there buying homes left and right, high prices. And the seller's like, oh, I'm going to take this offer because it's cash and it's higher, and they don't need to get a loan, and so I'm not worried about it appraising. And then the finance buyers, people like normal getting a loan, said, whoa, 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 hold on just a minute. I understand why you want to take that cash buyer, but listen to this. I'm going to offer more than them, and I know that the home is not worth this. And I know that when I go to the bank, it won't appraise. And the bank's going to say, I'm not giving you that much money. But guess what? I've been saving my money all these months that I've been getting shut down and rejected. I've just been saving up all my money. So when the home doesn't appraise, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'm going to give you this money out of my own pocket. I know the home's not worth it, but I'm going to give it to you anyway, just like a cash buyer would. And all of a sudden, cash buyers are taken aback, because these finance buyers are putting pressure on them. Were sellers paying closing costs? Nope. Were they making repairs? Nope. People were buying ugly houses, broken houses, busted houses, didn't matter, paying top dollar for them, and just happy as all be to get them, right? Because they were competing. And every time a home hit the market, it would sell for more money. So let's say you were looking at a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home that needed a lot of work, and it was worth $180,000. Okay. And then you get in a bidding war and it sells for $200,000. Now the base price for this busted 3-bedroom, 2-bath home is $200,000. That's what everybody with this type of home expects to get. So that home goes on the market. It's $200,000, gets a bidding war, sells for $215,000. Well, dang, now that same home that 3 weeks ago was worth $180,000 is now worth $215,000. I got to pay $215,000 to get it. So buyers were just like, just whatever I need to do to get this home now, please don't make me stay in this market, because the same home is getting more and more expensive. Okay. Were sellers paying closing costs? Again, no. Now, when markets soften, whether it's because of the economy, the type of buyers, if we've got a lot of unemployment, buyers don't have as much money, sellers who need to sell are helping supplement cash, where you see banks give more loans with 100% financing because they want to keep selling loans. But if there's a lot of unemployment, there's not as much money in our economy. So we're trying to shift and make all this possible for everyone. So there's a real likelihood right now, possibility, that sellers in our immediate market are going to continue to pay closing, or I should say a commission for buyer agents and buyers, because buyers may not have this money. But what will ultimately determine if sellers need to do this all the time or in different price points or type of homes will be the future of the economy. I also think that if you're in a higher price point, buyers that have more cash on hand, they're going to understand how a skilled buyer agent can actually keep them from making expensive mistakes and save them money and their costs cost that they can afford because they've got the cash for a buyer agent will offset whatever they would lose being unrepresented. So you'll find that a buyer like that will be much quicker and able to cover their agent cost as compared to a first-time home buyer who is making this really big investment for the first time, and they're going to more than likely need some financial assistance from a seller. And that's probably something that could continue for a long time because that's just kind of consistent with a first-time home buyer. All right, so back over here to our handy dandy guide. So that was one of the biggest changes. The other big change that we just briefly mentioned is that buyers now need to have a signed agreement. Okay, now I want to just click on over here because everybody's like, what? I am freaking out about signing an agreement. I don't know you from Adam. What am I signing for? What am I committed to? Now, please understand there are 4 options, and I'm going to talk about how much they cost, when you sign them, and what they look like. But the 4 option part is the most important thing I want you to walk away understanding, because a lot of times right now, and I think it is completely unintentional, I'm going to tell you the thing and then I'm going to tell you why. Many agents are accidentally misguiding clients into thinking they're signing a more formal contract than they actually are. Okay, let me tell you why though. I mentioned early on, the DOJ sends down all these rules. No implementation guidelines, just these brand new rules that are vastly different than anyone has ever experienced. And pause, PS, by the way, do you know why every agent freaked out when these rules came out? It's not for the reason that you would think. Most of the agents I've ever interviewed that have joined our team, that I've worked with, that have gone through real estate school, what they all say is, I'm not a salesperson. And the last thing they want to be looked at as a salesperson. Now, you and I just meet, or we're friends, whatever, and you say, Tammy, let me ask you about this house on 123 Banana Street. And I'm like, I need you to sign a document first. Can't answer any questions. You need to sign this document first. Can't go any further here. And you're like, I'm not sure that I want to buy it yet. I have a home to sell, but if I like it, I might see if I get the ball rolling. Can we just go see it? Yeah, but you got to sign this agreement first, okay? But if you sign this agreement, then we can go inside. Feels very weird for me. Feels very weird for you. So agents were up in arms like, I'm not about to send someone a document, a contract, in fact, about our relationship where if it's someone I know, that feels very pushy. And if it's someone I don't know, heck, I wouldn't sign that agreement, right? So inadvertently, agents are remembering the old way of doing things. And it's going to take some time because when this system and the rules first rolled out, what I observed, and it made so much sense, I get it, I feel it deep in my soul. Everyone was still trying to figure out how to take the old system and still use it with the new rules because the old system worked really well for buyers and sellers, or so we thought, okay? That was the opinion of the industry. So what we realized with the DOJ rules is there was a lot of stuff that they did not take into account. So we thought it was going to hurt the consumer. So the thought was, how can I still make this work? People weren't remembering other rules, other negotiation strategies. It was just like they had blinders on. So what I've seen happen, because there were no implementation guidelines, because the DOJ rules don't necessarily jihad with state law, national law, and contract law, I've noticed that people have different levels of education on this right now. So let's say the agent works for a brokerage, and let's say the brokerage has either a different opinion, a different interpretation, or maybe just has not been as well versed and have not studied as much as other brokerages. Well, then by default, their agents will have confusion because obviously leadership is from the top down, knowledge is from the top down. So they may still be learning these things. So what I'm hearing is agents are saying, hey, if you want to see a home, you have to sign an agreement with me. And in here, you'll have to stipulate what the commission is, and you'll have to agree to hire me and only me. By the way, the seller can pay the commission. That's what people are saying, okay? Could all that be true? You could do that. But let's talk about the real agreements and what is actually not frowned upon, okay? So first things first. If you're like, I was just scrolling Zillow, calm down a minute, and you just want to see the home, you can ask an agent if you can just be a customer and you sign something in our state known as a transaction brokerage agreement. Those are just a lot of words to say you're just a customer. You don't have to pay anything to see the house. You don't want the agent to represent you. You don't want counsel. You aren't asking for their advice. You're not asking for their opinion on the age of the mechanicals, how that impacts the value, what they think the home is worth, or anything like that. You just want to walk through the door, and if you like it, then you can talk more from there. So you can do a 1 day, 1 property, 2-day agreement, and the agent can agree to put no money down, no fee. Now, the reason I say agree, let me be very clear. You are now in the process of interviewing agents just like when you sell a home. So if you've never sold a home before, know this. When sellers go to sell their homes because they know their profit is super important, they interview multiple agents, okay? Hopefully they all do. But they will interview agents to find out who has a better history of making more money, has better marketing, better communicators, services, all types of things. They're interviewing their agent. Buyers, for the most part, it's kind of wild, would just luck into an agent for years. Like, I called Zillow, somebody answered. You have no idea. They could have sold one house, 5 homes, 20 homes. You don't know, but you're just now all of a sudden working with them. Or you called some number because you saw a house online and bam, now you're working with an agent. You think you saw a home with them. You don't know. I'm not saying that's bad. You could have lucked into an awesome agent, but also you didn't interview them. You didn't know anything about their negotiation strategies, their history, what they could do for you, their knowledge of houses, your knowledge of that area, anything like that, right? So now, what agents hope is that by agreeing to show you a house for free, because agents are working for free, we do not get paid by the hour. We are 100% commission. If you don't know what that means if you don't sell a house, it doesn't matter that you worked for 60 days, 90 days, you have no paycheck. Meanwhile, real estate is a business that you have to spend money every single day. So you really need to count on the ability to close those homes at the end of the time period, because if not, you're just working for free in the hole, okay? So agents have said, hey, we want to continue to make things comfortable for buyers. So most agents have said, I will agree that maybe one home, one day, something like that. I will let them see it for free. I'll open the door. I'm not representing them. I'm not answering all these questions or anything, but I'll let them see the home. Then if they like the home, we can talk about changing that agreement to what I'm going to talk about next. Now, the reason I say the agent has to agree, this isn't good or bad. This is just a business model. It's not illegal, and it's 100% allowed for both the buyer and for the agent. Some agents may look at their business, and this may not be a business stance. It just may be for that day, that week, that month. They may have a huge client load, have a lot going on to where they say, I can't afford to work for free. Anybody who wants my time, I guess they'll just have to trust that I'm amazing. And if they want me to open a door, I already just want to offer a high service. I don't want to go back and forth. I don't want to do a bunch of paperwork. I just want to sign the correct agreement and they hire me, and then we agree to this fee and we move on. Cool. If you and the agent want to do that, by all means do it. But most of the time, it's not going to work like that. You're going to go into the home. If you like the home, you're going to start asking questions. You're going to, I can guarantee you as a buyer, even if you're like, lock and key, I'm not asking any questions, you're going to ask a question, and you're immediately going to go into territory where, as a customer, the agent cannot answer you. So then you go from that transaction brokerage customer for free relationship to talking about the paid for options, who pays for them and what they mean. Now, I saw that this attorney said, and I'm actually going to show you the page because I'm actually going to go out of order, because for the most part, I did not delete anything she said, because even though she came in hot on some topics, I'm like, I don't want anyone to ever think that I'm hiding anything. So she's over here chit-chatting about whether or not you need an agent, and she makes the statement, listing agents do not like dealing with unrepresented buyers. And she says a lot of spicy things about this, okay? Now, listing agent is the agent that represents the seller, and basically what she's saying is, if you're a buyer and let's say you go to the house with a listing agent, you don't have to sign anything. You're allowed to go in, and you're like, I don't need to be represented. I'm going to represent myself, and or I just don't need an agent in general. And so she asserts here that agents don't like working with people who don't have their own representation, okay? Let me speak to this very quickly. That is not true. Sometimes when you hear things, people will get real fiery and you're like, the math's not mathing. I mentioned that agents are 100% commission. The other thing my grandma taught me was that he who has the gold makes the rules. So you could be a great listing agent, but if a buyer didn't show up to buy that home, you are just a listing agent. What you want to be is a selling agent. You actually want to sell the home for the seller. So agents like to work with whomever is ready, willing, and able to buy the home. Now, the whole reason you have to sign something, and one of the things she says in this section is, don't be tricked into signing something. An agent's going to try to pressure you, potentially into a bigger agreement. But the initial agreement, which says you understand you're unrepresented, she's like, they try to trick you into making you think you can't do it on your own. That is not what is going on. Our state, our license law requires that you have to sign something that basically says you understand clearly the risks of what it means to be unrepresented, and here is why. It is normal. It is human. It doesn't matter how many times I describe to you what I can do versus what I can't do as a customer. It won't sink in until you get into the transaction and ask a question. All of a sudden, I'm like, I can't answer that. Now, the first few times you ask me before under contract, you're going to be like, I feel like I know enough. I'm not worried you couldn't do it. I figured enough out. And I'm going to give you an example, real life example that just happened. We had someone show up to our property. They wanted to make an offer. They knew they weren't going to pay a commission as a buyer if they worked with the listing agent. So they said, I want to be unrepresented. We said, are you sure? You need to understand that when it comes to counsel, we work for the seller. I can write your offer for you. I can present anything you want. I can get the doors unlocked for you, but I do not represent you. I don't work for you. And this person said, bought tons of properties in the past, very well versed on it. I even inspect homes on my own sometimes, yada, yada, yada. And I said, okay, but do you understand the contract? Because there's a lot of sections in here and I can't explain them to you, but you need to understand how they perform because I don't want you to have a misinterpretation of what your rights are, but I also don't want you to be misinformed and then later feel like I should have been doing something for you, because usually the biggest pitfall is you say you understand, but later something goes sideways. You're like, well, you didn't tell me. I'm like, wasn't my position to tell you. Like, if you ask that question directly, I could tell you, but it's not my job responsibility or legal or ethical for me to offer that information to you because I don't work for you. I represent the seller. So anyway, buyer goes under contract. Immediately, they start asking questions that are pretty innocuous, but it instantly told me they did not understand the contract they signed. And in fact, they were about to forfeit a lot of rights they could have had, only because the seller was very kind and recommended and actually asked in writing that I share something with them. Was I even able to tell them what they asked me to tell them? And really, the seller wanted me to do this because they were like, there's no way they're not going to figure this out. I don't want to be surprised later, okay? But then what was very interesting, the buyer does their own personal inspection. They don't even hire an inspector. I probably would have. And if I were counseling them, I would have told them to. They noticed a few things. So the email they send to our team is, I noticed X, Y, and Z. I believe I should be asking the seller to address this. And the exact words after that were, please advise. Now here's the thing. We had to tell them we couldn't advise them because we work for the seller, which didn't feel good to us, didn't feel good to them, kind of hated that. But the bigger concern for me at this point is now they have several times over reinforced that they don't understand what we can't do. Even though we clearly expressed this, told them what we couldn't do, what happened with them is what happens with every buyer. Because you're a licensed agent, because you're capable of doing all these things, they don't understand where skill exists. They don't understand where knowledge exists. They don't understand where the support of an agent exists. And they just think, oh, anybody should be able to answer this question. So when you don't, that's the first time they realize, oh, I thought that actually was something that was your job. So agents do make you sign an agreement up front, and there's still a really good shot that you don't fully understand. But here's our position. We don't want to 1 or 2 years down the road, you get into this home, you realize something, and then you come sue us. Because what people have tried to do in the past is sue the agent, and when they're in front of the judge and they say, well, the agent didn't tell me this, and the judge said, well, they didn't represent you, and the buyer said, well, they acted like they did. And so then they're arguing that we should have told them because their interpretation of our presence was that we were representing them. So the reason, to her point, that we will have you sign something, it's not because an agent's tricking you, but it's because an agent wants to make sure you understand where your rights are and what an agent legally is allowed to do and when they're representing you and what that looks like. So that is the case of an unrepresented buyer, because I mentioned there are a couple of different models. One, you just have that one-time showing for free. If an agent agrees, you see the home. Then you can choose to be unrepresented. You go rogue. You just tell the listing agent, I need you to pass the paper, do minimal work. I'm gonna figure out all the steps. I'm gonna find a lender. I'm gonna find a home inspector. I'm gonna schedule these things. I'm gonna coordinate with the appraiser. I'm gonna coordinate with the title and the attorney company. I'll figure out if I need a survey. I'll make sure I get it all done in time. I'll figure out what the timelines are, yada, yada, yada. Okay, that's how that works. The second option, okay? Let me explain this in currency of bananas, okay? So pretend bananas are currency, okay? Now, this is where a lot of agents and buyers are defaulting. Let me pause and say, the DOJ does not like this. And I'm going to tell you the agents that are doing this and why they're doing it. And it is well-intentioned, very well-intentioned, okay? So this option says a seller can and will pay all of the commission for the buyer agent. Now, at first blush, you're like, wait, isn't that how they used to do it? Is that still allowed? And isn't that how they used to do it? So isn't it still allowed? Yes and yes. It is how we used to do it, and it is allowed, okay? But why doesn't the DOJ like it? So if you are hiring an agent to work for you, a buyer agent, their job is to work for you before you get a home under contract. So let's say you go in this home, you fall in love with it, you're ready to make your offer, and you say, Mr. Seller, here are all my terms, and P.S. by the way, I need you to pay my agent. And the seller says, I'm not paying. I'm not gonna pay today. Like, I might pay later. I'm not paying today. Home's been on the market 24 hours. I'm not paying. Or I've got 12 other showings. I'll wait for a buyer who doesn't need me to pay their agent commission. And you're like, but I love the house. And they're saying, I'm sorry, I'm not paying. Now, that doesn't mean that at that moment you and your agent can't have a conversation. You can figure out if you've got that money in savings or someplace you can borrow it from, so you can pay them to represent you and pursue this home or whatever you're gonna do moving forward. But if you had a plan that did not involve the seller playing, you would not be at that crossroad at that time. The DOJ doesn't like this for several reasons. Basically, they want the buyers to be prepared and to have this negotiated with their agent so the sellers can be prepared, so the sellers aren't expected to carry that burden. Now, let me pause here because I've been very careful the whole time as I've talked about this, and people are like, do you agree with the DOJ or not? The only reason I disagree with this part, this section, sure, by principle, the buyer should be prepared to pay their agent. Yes, I can get on board with that. Sellers should be prepared. They pay their agent. Cool, I can get on board with that too. However, if a buyer needs it, I go back to my story of 2006, 2007 and the market changing, okay? Whatever a buyer needs, they can always ask a seller for. All a seller can do is say no. And I do think that that is where a lot of people have forgotten things. I've had buyers before that have been like, Tammy, can we see this home that's $300,000? I know my loan is only for $285,000. But the home's been on the market for 6 months. So maybe the seller would take a low offer. And if they won't, it's fine. I'll make my low offer and I'll walk away. But maybe it's been sitting on the market. Maybe they would agree to it. And guess what? Those deals work out all the time. Now, the seller obviously felt the home was worth more. They had it priced higher. But then they took a lower price. Why? Because we're in active negotiations and all bets are off the table when you're in active negotiations. So I do think that a buyer can ask a seller to pay whenever, whether they were planning to pay or not. Either party, okay? Now, here's the thing that I think agents are doing wrong. I hate to say it out loud. I'm scared to make statements like this because I'm an agent too, okay? And sometimes when I say these things, some agents look at me and they're like, you're not thinking like a buyer's agent. I'm like, I am. I work with a lot of buyers. I'm having really tough conversations right now, okay? But I want them to be prepared. The idea of signing a buyer agreement that says the seller will pay communicates to the DOJ and the whole world that you have not realized yet that we're not doing business the old way anymore. That is signifying that you still think the responsibility and the burden should be fully on the seller. And in doing so, because sellers are hearing from the news that they don't have to pay commission, it's pseudo setting the buyer up for failure because there are some sellers who will misinterpret the media. And yes, it's true, they don't have to pay, but they'll just be thinking, I'm not paying anymore. So now you've got a group of sellers who may eventually end up paying. I mean, they could draw a line in the sand and then nobody can buy their home. And then they've got to change their stance on that if they want to sell. But your buyer would be better prepared if you had a different plan. So let's go back to the banana currency. Here are the two times where banana currency can come in, options 3 and 4. Options 3 says this. I'm your agent, you want to hire me. And I say, okay, I charge 3 bananas. That's what my service fee is. And you say, cool. I'm looking at my piggy bank. I have, like in my refrigerator, I guess, my pantry. I've got 3 bananas, Tammy. Cool. But Tammy, I would really like to save some of these bananas for guests. So if the seller's willing to pay the whole commission or part of the commission, can you let them give you some bananas and I'll keep my bananas? Yes. So let's say you fall in love with the home. We go to see it. Guess what? Seller is offering to give 3 bananas. Well, guess what? My fee is 3 bananas. Seller will pay 3 bananas. The seller's going to end up paying for me as your agent. You can keep your 3 bananas in your pantry, refrigerator, wherever you keep them. Okay. Let's say you fall in love with a different house and the seller is offering 2 bananas and you're like, cool. So the seller gives me 2 bananas, but I need 3 bananas, so you only have to give me 1 banana. You see how it works? So we're splitting the fee. So you don't necessarily know until you get there, because also that same buyer could go to a different house and love it, and we make an offer and the seller says, I'm not giving any bananas. So you're like, oh, bummer, but cool. I have my 3 bananas in the pantry, Tammy. Thanks for trying, but that's fine. I'll go ahead and cover your fee with my 3 bananas. I had it scheduled in my budget anyway. I'm ready to go with this, okay? So that is the best place of preparedness if sellers are willing to participate. And that's a great place to be too, because let's say you first love new homes and then you fall in love with an old home and it needs a lot of work. Well, you might really be hoping that seller's paying some bananas because you're like, dude, I'm going to have to replace a roof or an HVAC or something like that later. So please help me with this banana payment thing because I need to save my bananas for later, right? All right. So then the final option, and this is the one that the DOJ hearts the most. This is the one they really like. The buyer is exclusively responsible for paying their agent fee. So if my fee is 3 bananas, you as the buyer have agreed to pay the fee of 3 bananas. Now, I want to pit stop on this for a second because this always gets super scary for everybody. Agents, buyers, consumers, whomever, okay? Sometimes when you hear 3 bananas, you're like, I don't know, I mean, Tammy, it's cool. Are 3 bananas like $300, $3,000, $30,000? All commission's always negotiable, okay? And I want to be very clear on this. There is no standard that is true. And I recently had a conversation with a seller. They were not talking to me about my service, but they got super hostile. They were telling me about a story with another agent and they were so angry because the agent would not tell them what the average was. And yes, we definitely saw trends in commission rates before, but as we've been discussing this on our team, when it comes down to like, but what is your minimum fee you can accept? 1, it depends on the house. 2, it depends on the client and the type of property they're buying and the support they need. So for example, okay, let's say you tell me you only want a newly built home and it looks like you're trending in the direction of getting one from a new community. Now, I will tell you there's a lot of work that people don't realize. I'm also going to tell you this. They did a poll recently and they asked buyers how many hours they thought an agent worked in a transaction, and it was solid. People said 10 to 15 hours max. On average, when things go well, it's 80 to 100 hours. So it's way more work than people realize behind the scenes, okay? Now, a lot of times in new construction community, you're like, there was an agent sitting at the model home. We all showed up together. I picked a house. They wrote the contract. What did you do? There's so much happening behind the scenes. I'll break that down another day. And even though they're going to write that contract, every time I have ever read a new construction contract, it never has correct language for my clients. They would have agreed to do things they didn't mean to do. And in fact, the on-site agent didn't know because they don't even write those contracts. Corporate does. So if I were not there eagle-eyeing those contracts, the buyer wasn't going to get what that well-intentioned on-site agent wanted them to get because there's always mistakes in those contracts, almost 100% of the time, okay? So, but let's just say you want this new home. So it is true, you're buying a new home, maybe it's already built, maybe you decide you're not doing inspections, we'll cross that bridge one day, all these things, okay? And so maybe it's not any more than my normal 8,200 hours, okay? 8,200 hours. Conversely, let's say you are in a budget where we already know we're going to be pushing the budget, but it just so happens in the area you want to be, all of those homes really need a lot of work. But what I also know is you don't have a budget for that. So what I also know is you're not super handy and you don't really know anything about houses. So you're only thinking paint and carpet, but I'm also thinking major mechanicals, roof, HVAC, and all these other things and the costs that you may incur with those. So for those, yes, I could let you get into the transaction, but I don't ever want to see my clients blow $1,000 on inspections and things where I could proactively tell them about things with the home while I'm there with them at the showing appointment and after the appointment that could answer a lot of questions and prevent them either from going under contract or going into the contract more appropriately, maybe saving money, doing certain things with the offer so they could be prepared to address those things later, or having conversations with the listing agent to see what the seller's mindset was. You can talk to agents sometimes and find out upfront the seller's not going to do anything, and then you can talk to your client and say, this is what this is probably going to cost you. Do you want to move forward with an offer or not based on the current disposition of the seller? So those are the kind of things that you would be helping them do, but it could take a lot more time getting under contract. And then once you're under contract, talking to vendors, vetting things out, it's a lot more than your normal 100 hours. So maybe for that client, because it's going to take up a lot more of your time, prevent you from working with other clients, you may have a desire for more bananas. Maybe that's a 5 banana client. Maybe new construction is a 3 banana client. All sorts of things may impact an agent's requirement for their fee structure. Also, an agreement with an agent may be like, hey, my work for you will be 5 bananas. Yes, we want the seller to pay, but if you can't get the seller to pay at all, I would be willing at that time to reduce my fee to 4.5 bananas or 4 bananas, okay? So there are all sorts of things that can change. Commissions can be negotiable. An agent can agree if they're willing and it still makes sense for them because they're still in business as well. They can agree to reduce their banana percentage, okay, to work for you, but that's something that you guys would discuss. So I go back to what the DOJ prefers, which is that you are fully responsible for your buyer agent fee. Now you're like, but what if the seller would be willing to pay the bananas? Why would I even offer to do that then? Like, I would love to know that. Great, cool. Yes, choose option 3 that I talked about where you are responsible, but you'll still ask the seller. But the reason the DOJ prefers the other one is it falls directly in line with it. But here's the deal. Let's say you don't ask the seller to pay, but you find out they would have been willing. Well, then you can always say, Mr. Seller, since I'm not asking you for any bananas because I'm way prepared and I've already got that covered, could we get this money back in the form of closing costs? So maybe I'm not taking as much money out of my bank because you're going to cover that fee for me. Or could we take some money off the purchase price? Or, hey, I noticed that HVAC is really old and I know it's not dead yet, but how about you just take that money and replace it or give me a credit in this form so I can have it replaced in the near future? So you're still in a position of strength and you're going to be able to negotiate. But then also, if you end up falling in love with the home and there's competing offers, you're no longer worried about losing out now because, hey, you are able to cover your agent, so that's not going to stand in the way. All right, let's pop back over here to our handy dandy document, and I'm going to go back to where I was, and we're going to speed race through this, okay? All right, now, I just mentioned to you things are negotiable. You're not freaking out as much. You know their options, who can pay. Option 1 is free where the agents let you in, and it's just a short period of time. Option 2, 3, and 4, it's either you paying all of it, you paying some of it, or potentially the seller paying all of it. I mentioned they are negotiable by law, but you do want to make sure you talk to your agent about that. And these are the models broken down a little bit more. And this even tells you here, again, this is the law professor statement, that there is a model, the pay your own broker model. That is the one that the DOJ prefers. Okay. Now there's more. Some brokerages I mentioned, will let you tour the home, for no fee. Some of them are even doing touring agreements, or an agent may on their own choose to do that, which means for 1 day, 1 home, 3 days, 7 days. They may just say, you don't owe me any money. You can call me anytime to see homes on these days. I'll show them to you. Now, what's the max amount an agent can be paid? I mean this wholeheartedly when I say it's negotiable, but one thing the settlement has said is that if, let's say, you have agreed to pay your agent 2 bananas, but the seller says they would have been willing to pay your agent 3 bananas, the agent cannot increase their banana percentage. The most they can accept is what you and the agent had agreed that they would get paid, even if the seller were willing to pay more. The seller would have to give you that banana to use for what you want, or they could keep it themselves. Now, I mentioned that there are some things that can and will change between now and November. This is one of the biggest things that have been in discussion because it's contract law. The DOJ says, hey, we don't want to allow this. But the question has been, contract law says as long as all parties agree, you can do what you want. So if an agent can agree to reduce their commission to help a buyer out, why could they not increase the commission if the seller is offering more? The DOJ says you can't. Contract law says you can. So you kind of have to just talk to your agent and figure out what their interpretation is of this and what they would be willing to do. And I'm going to leave it there. I started to see something else. I was like, not going to do it. Okay, understand the law. A lot of things here for you to read. I would recommend you read this in detail. I want to explain this section right here because if you read this without any context, it sounds very scary. You'll hear the word sometimes breach of contract. Here's what breach of contract means. Breach of contract means you didn't have a reason. You just walked away, okay? You ate a bad burrito and you're like, I don't want to buy this home anymore. Seller didn't do anything wrong. Nothing's wrong with your loan. Nothing's wrong with the house beyond what was already wrong with the house that you already knew about. But you just like, I don't want to buy it anymore, okay? It's called defaulting on a contract. This is true that in nearly every buyer agreement, it says if you choose to default, the agent and their company could come after you for commission. Basically, they did their job. So if you just decided you didn't want to do it, then you could have to pay that money back. Now, if the contract falls apart for reasons that are not your fault, the loan doesn't work out, the appraisal doesn't work out, you do the inspections and the seller's being ridiculous and won't make any repairs, or if you terminate during that period, you legally can. You don't owe your agent a commission. But that is one thing that she mentions in here, and that is true, and most people don't know that. and she specifically says, hey, even if your agent says, I'm not going to force you to buy the home, I'm not coming after you for this money, that might very well be true, but you need to have something in writing if you're going to choose to terminate. You're not just terminating the contract. You need to make sure that you would not be on the hook for this money as well. I have honestly never seen anybody do this, but I know people who have. I mean, I don't know them personally. I didn't actually see it. I just heard about it in like stories, but so I know it could happen, but there's that. Okay. Now, it says you can be tricked into signing a representation agreement. I left her words here. They were so intense. But what she should have said was you could be forced into signing a representation agreement with commission, because I mentioned you would be signing something. It could be a free touring agreement, but she's talking about representation. But I want to pit stop here because she said tricked, okay? It's only tricked if you don't know what you're signing, but what she's implying here is they can force you into signing something where you're hiring that agent. That's not necessarily true. I'm not going to say that an agent would never do that. I don't know every agent on this planet, but there are some agents who will only show you a home if you are a client. They want to offer you that level of service. They don't want to open a door for someone who's not a client. I'm not recommending that. I'm just telling you there's some agents like that. So that's not a trick. That's their business model. That is how they value their business, and that's what they're willing to do. So if you're not comfortable with that, it's not that you're being tricked, but you would say, hey, I really like you and I might be hiring you, but I just need someone to open this door right now. I don't want to sign that type of agreement, so I'm going to try to find an agent who would agree just to let me in and not make me sign a contract of this type right now. Okay. You may be told things that are wrong. Again, this is in alignment with what I just said. They're not necessarily wrong. Yes, it is true you can go into that home without having to pay possibly, but maybe that agent doesn't like that way of business. Okay. So it's not wrong. That's just their business. You may be told not to worry about certain things, or I'll waive my commission later. Again, it's what we just talked about. It's cool if they say that, but they need to put that in writing, or you could be charged that commission later. Some agents may want to charge more if you're buying a home off the market. We call them FSBOs, for sale by owner. That could be true, but they would need to put that in writing and describe what their services would be to you, what the extra work is they're talking about. I'll be candid with you. It's a lot of extra work in these situations because sellers engaged selling their own, thinking they knew what to do. And then always 100% of the time they get in the transaction, they have no idea what they're supposed to be doing, and they're not handling anything on their end that would facilitate the transaction because they don't know what they don't know. So some agents may charge miscellaneous fees. There's one brokerage in particular where I see this, and basically it's like an admin fee, transaction fee. She actually said junk fees. They're not junk fees. You really are paying for that service. You might be paying for a staff member, but sometimes people prefer this. I would personally prefer this. Instead of having a surprise miscellaneous fee, if they say they have that, just say, hey, can you put everything in the commission? Whatever I'm supposed to owe you, don't surprise me with another fee later that I'm going to forget about. Put everything in that same line item, okay? It says your contract may limit your right to sue in court. South Carolina law basically says, hey, if anybody has an argument, you have to go in front of someone known as an arbitrator in mediation, which basically try to settle it. So all this is just saying that most contracts have a clause in there that says you might not be able to go to court. You might have to deal with an arbitrator. All right. Now, I do want to say, as you're reading this on your own time, this guide is intended to provide an overview. Okay. It's not a catch-all. Talk to an attorney. I'm not an attorney. I'm not legally advising you, but I wanted to get to this point because I said, if you made it to the end, let me tell you, there are lots of different ways to handle this. Let's say you're like, okay, cool. I get it. I just need to pony up and pay for my own buyer agent. And even if the seller will pay, I need to be prepared to pay. But also, I really don't want to pay. Is there a way not to pay? Sure. Kind of, sort of. Okay. One, yes, the seller can pay. Now, the seller can pay a couple of different ways. Don't even worry about what this means right now, because usually, unless you've bought a lot of real estate, you're going to hear this and you're like, I don't know how much this is or what it means. Let's say you're buying a home. It's $300,000. And let's say you have no down payment. Don't worry about what that means. Like, it doesn't exist. You got a loan where you don't have to put any money down. And so you're like, hooray. But then you're talking to your lender and they're like, but your closing costs are $6,000. And you're like, I'm sorry, what? I thought you said I didn't have to pay anything. You have two fees. You have your down payment, usually. That's a number. And then you have closing costs. And that's like your attorney fees are built into that. The lender's fees are built into this. This is if you're not cash, by the way. Cash buyers have different fees. Title insurance, escrow of taxes, insurance, all that kind of stuff. Don't worry about all those words, but that's just a lump sum of money. And you pay that on closing day alongside your down payment if you have a down payment with your loan, okay? Now, during, let's say, the transaction, you are prepared to pay your agent, but you're like, I would really not want to see those bananas leave my account, so I don't really want to pay my closing cost and pay my agent. I can, but I don't want to. So what you might do is go to the seller and say, hey, Mr. Seller, can you pay 3 bananas worth of my closing costs? Seller says, sure. Cool. So that means you didn't spend that money. So yes, you paid your bananas to your agent for them working for you, but then you got the seller to pay your closing cost bananas, so you didn't spend that money. So it's kind of a wash, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's one option. Another option, if you're getting a loan, is you can ask your mortgage lender to pay your bananas. Now, they usually can't pay all of your bananas, and you do need to know that there's a little bit of a catch there. When they pay some of your costs, they do that by increasing your interest rate. So you need to know that. Now, sometimes they increase it and your payments go up a little bit, but it's not a big deal. You'd rather do it that way. But sometimes it might increase it to where you're not comfortable with your payments. So that's always something to investigate. Another option. All right. So say the seller says that the home is worth $200,000 and 3 bushels of bananas. Okay. I'm sorry I'm using banana bushels, but I started on this analogy. I have to stick with it. Okay. But your buyer agent's also charging you 2 banana bushels, which you have, but you really don't want to spend that banana bushel money because you looked at the house and it needs paint and flooring. Okay. So you go to the seller and you're like, listen, my buyer agent is charging me 2 banana bushels, and I know you're charging $200,000 and 3 banana bushels for your home. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell my bank that we're going to offer $200,000 and 5 banana bushels. So you're getting more than you asked for. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn around and ask you to pay my agent the 2 banana bushels. And the seller's like, wait, what? And you're like, yeah, okay. So basically my bank is going to loan you the banana bushels for me, and then you're going to pay my client, but then I don't have to like come out of pocket with that money. The bank, I'm going to just keep paying them for the extra banana bushels that I had to like finance in, but you're going to actually just like put it in the contract that you're giving it to my client, but really I'm financing it through the bank, right? So it is still like magical banana bushel money. The money is still out there, but it never comes out of your bank account. You're basically financing it into the loan, and you're asking the seller to pay, but you're really not, because you're offering them more than the home is worth, and you're financing it into the loan. And if you got really confused right now, here's the bottom line. You paid your agent. The money existed there, but you really worked it into the home loan, so you didn't have to come out of pocket or out of pantry with those banana bushels, okay? So that's another creative way. So paying for your agent doesn't always mean it comes out of your checking account, okay? It can also involve the seller. The seller can pay all of it. We've mentioned on our team, this went into effect about 10 days ago. 100% of our transactions for buyers and sellers, the sellers have paid the buyer agent commission, either some or all of it, okay? So it is still happening in our marketplace. We don't know for how long or what it will look like that. But the bottom line is there's more than one way to skin a cat. Grandma also said that. So if you have been thinking about buying, your first step is this as well. Thinking about buying doesn't matter that you're not ready now. Go ahead and start interviewing agents. Now, let me be honest. I am the girl that and I'm in sales, right? Technically, I don't like to think that I'm in sales, but technically I've been selling houses for 20 years. I am in sales, whether I want to admit it or not. But I can walk into any store and instantly a salesperson can approach me and they can say, do you need help? Now, I just need to know where the kombucha is. I'm in a whole new store. If you don't know what kombucha is, doesn't matter. I don't know why I thought of kombucha as what I needed. Kombucha. I guess I just saw the can, but I just thought about that. So I don't know where it is in the store. I could easily ask them and they could tell me and save me a lot of time. But what am I going to say? No, I'm good. Thank you so much. Bye. Because I just don't want to talk to them. So I'm like, don't tell me anything. Don't talk to me. I'm just going to find it. I'd rather wander for an extra 7 minutes and just ask for something because I don't want to engage with a person who might sell me something. It's a grocery store attendant. What are they going to try to sell me? Now, for a house, you're like, not going to interview an agent before I feel ready because they're going to hound me. They're going to want me to buy it. Let me tell you something that buyer agents don't do. Okay. Even seller agents. We learn very early in this business that we don't sell houses, period. End of story. Okay. I cannot sell you a house. You either want to move and want a house or you don't. End of story. Now I can guide you on techniques. I can let you know when you're prepared sooner than you think you are. I can educate you. I can grow your confidence in things. I can do all of that. But at the end of the day, if that's not what you want to do, you will find, even if I get you in a contract, you will find a way out, guaranteed. Okay. So agents do not try to pressure buyers into buying. But if they say, hey, I'm thinking of buying something next week, next month, next year, we are all about having conversations so you feel prepared, you understand what you're getting into. In fact, we prefer that because we're going to have a meeting with you at some point anyway. We're going to interview with you at some point. It's better for all of us if we do it today. And even if I don't hear from you again for 11 weeks or 11 days or 11 months or 5 years, what I know is we have a signed agreement. So when you call me, I'm like, yes, I don't have to have a weird conversation now about signing something. I'm hired. I work for you. What Zillow house did you just accidentally stumble upon that you want me to show you? leave. Let's get in the car and go. That is a dream come true. So don't be worried if you talk to an agent now, if you're interviewing agents now, but you didn't feel ready. Maybe you wanted to, finish school, maybe you're back in school. You wanted to start a new job. You wanted to get the kids enrolled in something. You wanted to have a baby first. You wanted to get married first. You want to do all these things. You wanted to, whatever. You can want to do those things. Or you just know you may not even need this money, but you have a fictitious number in your brain that you want to have in savings and you have no real reason for it. You just want to have this much money in savings before you do anything different. You don't even have to tell your agent all those things. You can if you want to. I'm sure they'd love to hear. But the bottom line is you don't need to be afraid that they're going to try to push you into doing something. Agents, we, again, work for free until we sell a home. So we're not trying to push someone who's not ready to buy or sell into buying or selling because we know that's not possible. So set up those interviews. Talk to your agents. Find one who can answer all your questions that will sign the type of agreement you want. You might even say, hey, I like you. I'm going to intend to sign a long-term agreement when I'm ready to see homes. I want to start, though, with the touring agreement for 3 days, for 3 homes, for whatever, because it might be a little bit longer. If I end up calling you tomorrow, cool, then we'll just go to this other agreement. But if not, let's just know I might not call you for 6 months. It'll look like that first. Awesome. But we've met and we know the end goal. So you might have a lot of questions, or you're wondering, is this different from state to state? Not really, because right now this is the DOJ ruling. It is different agent to agent. You just need to ask questions. And this handy dandy guide that will be in the description is one that you can use because it is universal, and you can take it and ask these agent questions to the agent to figure out if they are going to be the one that is a good fit for you. And as you move forward, you can go in confidence. So if you have questions, or if you're like, hey, I would love to do a buyer consult, I'm going to be buying a home in South Carolina, I think I might want to hire you, I have lots of questions, please reach out. I would love to meet with you, whether we're going to do a Zoom call. That's my favorite way to connect. Phone call, whatever it looks like, we can get connected and talk more, and you can ask all the questions and learn what it is an agent can do for you. Because what is an agent doing for 80 to 100 hours? I would love to tell you. Not everything, because you would be exhausted, but would love to give you a bird's eye view. So I'm Tammy. You can always reach me by phone or text, and I would love, or email, Skywrite, Courier Pigeon, whatever, Zoom. But I would love to connect with you and talk about buying or selling a home in South Carolina. Okay, so maybe the whole financing thing made your brain hurt, and there was a graphic there, but you're like, I still don't understand. So on a parting note, let's look at this girl math together. Okay. So the home you want is $200,000, okay? And your agent says, I charge 5 bananas to make sure that you get the best deal on this $200,000 house, okay? So what you know is you need to go to the bank and you're like, listen, I need $200,000 and I need, 5 banana bushels because I don't have these banana bushels in my pantry right now. And you're like, and I really don't want to have to go buy these banana bushels up front. So bank says, no problem. Go to the seller. Offer the seller $200,000, and as your bank, we're going to go ahead and say, also put the 5 banana bushels into your offer. Now, weird, because the seller said the house is only worth $200,000. So why are you going to also offer them 5 banana bushels? Because you're going to turn around and say to the seller, also in your offer, okay, Mr. Seller, I'm not really giving you the 5 banana bushels. The bank says that the way they want me to make this offer to you is to give you the $200,000 and to give you the 5 banana bushels. But I need you to turn around and give those 5 banana bushels to my agent. So basically, can I just work the banana bushels into my loan so I don't have to come out of pocket with this money? It's like anything. It's like when you go to buy a car and you've got the price of the car and then you've got all the closing costs, and they say, hey, you don't have to pay anything today. We'll just put it into your loan. So that's what you're doing. You're putting those banana bushels into the loan. It looks like you're asking the seller to pay, but really the bank is paying. So that is another way that you can get your banana bushels, aka your agent's commission, covered and not have to worry about coming out of pocket or coming out of pantry any bananas and or money. All right, so it might be clear as mud still. Here's the bottom line. When you're looking to buy a home or sell a home, always talk to an agent, because then we don't have to talk in bananas. We can talk in numbers. We can literally say, how much is in your checking account? How much do you want to keep in your checking account? What type of home do you want to buy? Here's what this agent charges. Here's what other agents charge. Here's what I charge. And to get all of this accomplished, here's our best path forward and the way we should structure using your money, spending your money, investing your money. So if you have additional questions, let's talk about specifically what it is that you need. All right, I will see you again soon.